got me. Leave a message. I'll get back to you as soon as I can. Thanks.
Good afternoon, everyone. All the task force members are assembled, so we are going to go ahead and get started. If you require sign language interpretation, Ruth and Judy will be our sign language interpreters today. You can lock them to your screen by clicking the three dots in the right-hand corner. There's additional instructions in the chat function, so please feel free to refer there if you need further assistance. With that, we'll go ahead and get started. Thanks.
Hello, good afternoon, everybody.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. My name is Therese Dominguez, and I, along with my co-chair here, Mark Schroeder, would like to thank you all very much for participating in this afternoon's inaugural meeting of the Stretch Limousine Passenger Safety Task Force. I want to thank you all first and foremost for your service on this important task force. We're going to have a chance here in a minute to do some introductions and go around and get to know each other a little bit better. But before we do, I want to take a moment and acknowledge why we're here. We're here because tragically, many lives have been lost as a result of the limousine crashes in Schoharie and Long Island. Members of this task force personally know the pain of losing a loved one, their loved one. The tragic loss of life that has resulted from these crashes, this loss has truly devastated families and has literally shaken communities and, quite frankly, the state to its core. Please know that we are with you. We grieve with you, we pray with you, and we can only hope that you and your families find comfort and peace in the memory of those that you've lost. This is why our work is so very important. As we will discuss in more detail shortly, we have a very important legislative mandate to carry out, and that is to conduct a comprehensive review of matters influencing the safety, the adequacy, the efficiency, and reliability of stretch limousines in transportation in the state of New York. That is what our charge is. That is what our mission is. Our deliberation, our work, is intended to inform the identification of any potential gaps in current law or regulation that may not have been addressed. We also need to look at perceived and unintended outcomes of existing measures. The recommendations emanating from the work of this task force will be summarized in a report that will be submitted to the governor and to the legislature. So in preparation for this meeting, each of the task force members that have joined us today, and we've got them here on screen, we should have received and will have received by this point in time both an electronic version and a hard copy of a detailed package that includes a printed version of all the limousine legislation passed in New York, as well as at the federal level, since 2018. These measures were intended to increase passenger protections, heighten criminal and civil penalties, and strengthen enforcement provisions. And I just want to highlight a few of the examples of the legislation that's been passed. Heightened civil penalties for operating a vehicle placed out of service. Increased minimum insurance requirements for commercial vehicles with a seating capacity of 8 or more passengers. And authorization for the state to immobilize or impound a stretch limousine for an out-of-service defect. Building upon the foundation of this legislation, our charge is to develop recommendations on how New York State and or our federal government can further enhance stretch limousine vehicle and passenger safety. The conversation today is intended to begin to identify and collect those additional suggestions, which will be summarized and categorized for further consideration at subsequent task force meetings. In order for us to succeed, your voice, your input as task force members is essential. It's essential to helping to inform future measures to enhance safety of stretch limousines. We all share the same objective. We all want to ensure that no family should ever have to experience the anguish of what the families of the Schoharie and Long Island crashes have endured. Again, I want to thank you all very much for your participation and commitment to the work of this task force. We very much appreciate your time. We very much appreciate your input. And now I'd like to turn it over to our co-chair, Mark Schroeder.
Thank you, Commissioner. In a few minutes, our moderator will ask you to introduce yourself with a little background information and where you're from, so I'll do the same. My name is Mark Schroeder. I'm from Buffalo, New York. I was in the private sector for 25 years, sales and marketing. I was an elected official for 17 years, 3 years in the Erie County Legislature. In fact, I was the legislator who came in after me was Tim Kennedy. Many of you know Tim Kennedy as Senator Tim Kennedy, Chairman of Transportation and an advocate for limousine safety. I served in the New York State Assembly for 7 years and then was elected to the Buffalo City Controller's position and served there for 7 years. In 2019, I became the Commissioner of the Department of Motor Vehicle and the Chair of the Governor's Traffic and Safety Committee. So good afternoon to all of you. And I want to welcome the task force members today. And like Commissioner Dominguez said, we thank you. We thank you very, very much for your participation. I know for some of you, the pain that you endured is immense. And I want to express my deepest condolences to the task force members and their families who have suffered so dearly as a result of the crashes in Schoharie and Long Island. We continue to pray and grieve for you. As you know, New York State and the federal government strengthened our laws to help ensure that we never face another tragedy. Through this task force, we will examine whether more needs to be done to protect all New Yorkers. Governor Kathy Hochul has confidence that we will work expeditiously to identify recommendations that will build on the progress we have made at the state and federal level. Today and throughout these meetings, we want to listen and to have meaningful discussions. The involvement of every task force member is paramount to fulfilling our charge. I am honored to serve with all of you, and I share your hope that these discussions will be beneficial to all New Yorkers. I thank you in advance for your contributions to this important process. Commissioner?
Thank you very much, Mark. So let's start with a few additional introductions here. Joining us also today, here with us, is Superintendent of the New York State Police, Kevin Bruin. Yes. Good morning, good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Also joining us today at the dais is Executive Deputy Commissioner for the New York State DOT, Mr. Ron Epstein. Ron?
Good morning, everybody. Afternoon.
And last but certainly not least, let me take a moment to introduce our moderator and our facilitator for the task force, Mr. Alan Krieger, who's to my right here. Alan is president of Krieger Solutions, a training and a consulting company that provides facilitation and leadership training. He's provided this type of service for public and nonprofit agencies for nearly 30 years and has worked extensively with a number of New York State agencies on several projects. We're glad to have you with us, helping us out today with this task force and certainly as we go through our work. So thank you very much, Alan. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Alan so that we can continue our introductions and proceed with our agenda today.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner. As moderator, my job is to help us keep on track and keep in alignment with each meeting's agenda and to help clarify discussion where it's needed. Our agenda today is to begin to frame the work of the task force. We'll begin with short introductions, then you'll hear a presentation about the charge of the task force and a review of relevant legislation that's been enacted in the past 2 years. After this, we'll give each member an opportunity to share their suggestions and recommendations for enhancing limousine safety in New York State. These recommendations will be the basis of our future meetings. I will close the meeting today with a short note about our future meetings and how we're going to move forward. I'd like to go around and have each task force member who has not yet been introduced tell us who you are and where you're from. You'll have an opportunity later to share your questions, recommendations, and concerns. For now, we would just like to have introductions. And since we can't go around the table, I'll just call on folks. If I mispronounce your name, please correct me. Let's begin with Nancy DeMonte.
Hello.
Hello,
It's
good
an
afternoon.
It's an honor to work with everybody. Long time waiting for this. I am from Long Island. My daughter was a survivor of the Cutchogue limousine crash 6.5 years ago, which killed 4 of her friends, and 3 other girls were severely injured. So while I can't put myself in the shoes of losing a child, I can put myself at the place where a child loses 4 friends and lives infamously with those memories. 8 surgeries later and loss of eyesight is what brought me here. And I am a professor in the State University, so part of my work also kind of led me here, and social justice. And you know, there's lots of work that has to be done for the survivors, for the families, and for those who are so sadly deceased. This is in honor of them, all of New York.
Thank you very much, Nancy.
Thank you.
So Kevin Cushing next.
Good afternoon. Again, my name is Kevin Cushing. I'm the father.
Kevin, this is Marie Therese. It's very difficult to hear you.
All right, is that any better?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. My name's Kevin Cushing, and I'm the father of Patrick Cushing. I'm sure as most of the committee members know, Patrick was one of 20 people killed in the Schoharie limousine accident, October 2018. My background is I was born and raised in Amsterdam, New York, as many of the other accident victims were, currently reside in Saratoga Springs. The background of why I'm here today, I believe, is months after the accident, I and other family members worked with the New York State Legislature, their council, and others to try and craft limousine legislation that, had it been in place prior to the accident, it would have avoided that accident. It took months and months to pull that legislation together and eventually get it passed in February of 2020. I want to be clear that we weren't interested in that time in creating legislation simply for the sake of creating legislation. We didn't want to basically impose unnecessary and burdensome regulations on the limousine industry. It's our belief, it was our belief and still is, that most limousine companies run safe and efficient operations. Our goal is really to address the bottom feeders and backyard limousine operators to make sure that they were required to be required to meet sensible and life-saving limousine safety requirements. And I think we went a long way in getting to that point with the regulations passed, laws and regulations passed in 2020. At that time, we knew that we didn't know what we did know and what we didn't know. And we believed in the legislators believed that we create this committee that would meet approximately a year later, It's a little bit later than a year later, which is fine. We're ready to do it now. And revisit those bills and make sure that those bills were doing what they were supposed to do. And as was mentioned before, that there were no unintended consequences as a result of passing those bills. I look forward to working with everyone on the committee. I'm honored to be here, and I hope meaningful, positive regulations and are a result of what we do here in this task force. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kevin.
Thank you, Kevin.
Okay, next, Edward Stoppelman.
Hello, my name is Ed Stoppelman. I am a limousine and bus operator based in Westchester County. I was born and raised in Rockland County and then moved to Westchester, currently residing in New York City with my family. It really is an honor to be a part of this task force to help review the laws that have been passed, make recommendations for additional rules and regulations that could make our industry even safer and a model for not just New York, but for the entire country. As Kevin said, there's a whole range of operators in this industry. And I think we really do need to focus on those operators who want to flaunt the laws and they don't want to play by the rules and they don't want to operate safely. The tragedies that happened in Schoharie and Long Island were terrible, and they impacted all of us, whether we operated there or whether we didn't. It really did shake us all to the core, and my heart goes out to the families and those communities that were affected. So thank you for having me on this task force. I hope I can add some insight into how legitimate company operates a limousine and bus service. And I look forward to working with all of you.
Thanks, Ed.
Thank you.
David Brown.
Good afternoon. I'm David Brown. I'm the president and CEO of Premier Transportation. We're based out of Albany, New York. We have roughly 56 vehicles, everything from sedans, limousines, SUVs, 55-passenger motor coaches. And we serve all scopes, colleges, universities, funeral homes, corporate entities, and we also take care of professional teams. So we cover the whole spectrum as far as supplying transportation, and that also includes social events. I also own an ambulette service, which supplies non-emergency medical ambulance service. I currently serve on a few boards, one of them being a transportation board, being the Limousine Bus Taxi Organization of Upstate New York. I have 35 years of experience in the transportation business. We went out of our way to help the NTSB when it came time for the Schoharie crash, as far as investigating the bad limousine company, and they used our facilities and our mechanics to tear apart their transportation and their limousines to get a scope of what was going on. We work with them. We work with the New York State Police on the Schoharie incident. So we very much want to be part of the solution in everything going forward. Again, my condolences, I can't say this enough, to the families. We want to make sure things are set right. Thank you.
Thanks, David. Ronald Barton.
Yes, good afternoon. First off, I'd like to thank New York State Governor Kathy Hochul for my appointment to this task force, and also thank the New York State Senate Republicans who reviewed my resume and recommended this appointment to Governor Hochul. And that recommendation came through the Republican leader, Senator Robert Ortt. I'm glad you called me Ron, because I like that a lot better than Ronald. It's a lot shorter. Anyhow, my experience in inspection, maintenance, and preventive maintenance and repair started about 50 years ago. after I was discharged from the military in 1976, I went to work for the Delaware and Hudson Railway Company. I ended up as a work equipment repairman, which was my training from the military. And prior to that, I took a vocational course in high school. In 1986, I experienced severe spine injuries and was no longer able to work there because due to the heavy lifting and the heavy work that was involved with working on heavy equipment and trucks. So anyhow, in 1988, I took the exam to become a motor vehicle inspector for the state of New York. I retired in 2014 with a little over 25 years of service. And through those 25 years, I enforced federal and state regulations as they pertain to the transportation of property, passengers, and hazardous materials. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ron.
Next is Albro Fancher.
Good afternoon. My name is Albro Fancher. I'm a senior investigator with the state police. I responded to the Schoharie accident back in October of 2018 and was integral in the investigation into that crash and was asked to be on this task force, and I'm here to give whatever guidance that I can to help along with the process. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Albro. Next is Joan McDonald.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Joan McDonald, as mentioned. I am currently the Director of Operations for Westchester County, a position I've held for a little over 4 years. I also chair the New York State Bridge Authority. I have about a 20-year career in transportation. I'm not an engineer, nor am I a construction person, but I've held positions senior positions at Metro North Railroad, New York City DOT and EDC, and was the commissioner of New York State Department of Transportation from 2011 through mid-2015. I grew up in the Finger Lakes. I spent 12 years working in the New York State Legislature as staff. And I was also the Commissioner of Economic Development in Connecticut from 2007 through 2010. I look forward to hearing what opportunities we have for improving the safety of this industry and this sector, and dealing with, to quote Kevin Cushing, the bottom feeders. I think that is very important. And my sincere condolences to the families and to the friends of those who were lost in these tragic accidents, situations. And my heart does go out to all of you. And I look forward to our mission here.
Thanks, Joan.
Thank you, Joan.
And Matthew Driscoll.
Yeah, thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Matthew Driscoll. I'm the Executive Director of the New York State Thruway Authority. I'm from Syracuse, New York, where I still reside. My career spanned both private and public sector, private side in Syracuse in the real estate and restaurant industry for 25 years. I also served on the public side as a member of the City Council, Council President, and ultimately Mayor as the City of Syracuse. In 2010, I joined the state of New York, where I became the President and CEO of the Environmental Facilities Corporation. I then was asked to lead the Department of Transportation, and then was ultimately asked to lead the New York State Thruway Department, where I am at this time. I am very cognizant of the important responsibility that we all have here, and I take this very seriously, as I know we all do. And I also want to offer my deepest sympathies for those who've lost loved ones. Thank you.
Thanks, Matthew.
Thank you.
Okay, that is our task force. It's a very strong collection of folks, and look forward to our continuing deliberations. And I want to turn it over to Ron Epstein, who's the Executive Deputy Commissioner for New York State DOT. He's going to review the charge of the task force as stated in the legislation, that created this group. Ron will then briefly review the legislation that's been enacted at the state and federal level regarding stretch limousine safety over these past several years. This information is also included in the information you should have received on January 28th. Ron?
Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. First of all, let me thank those of you who helped formulate and ultimately help pass legislation that has been enacted in New York State. I know a number of you on the call today have been instrumental in the success of the legislation that's in place. So first of all, what I'd like to do is kind of level set and identify the vehicle that we're talking about today. The vehicle we're talking about is a stretch limousine, and that is defined in the statute as any motor vehicle with a chassis that has been altered post-manufacture, also having a seating capacity of 9 or more passengers, including the driver, and also used in the business of transporting passengers for compensation, so for hire. The statutory charge, which we referenced earlier in the meeting, is to conduct a comprehensive review of matters influencing the safety, the adequacy, the efficiency, and reliability of stretch limousine transportation of passengers for compensation. As part of the statutory charge, we are required to hold at least one public hearing in the state for the purpose of soliciting public comments on stretch limousine safety. That will be informed based on the participation today and over the subsequent meetings that we hold. We are required to undertake a review of actions and measures that are needed to ensure the safe, adequate, efficient, and reliable for-hire passenger transportation by stretch limousines, and specifically to make recommendations regarding the establishment and adoption of a uniform safety training program for drivers of such stretch limousines, the appropriateness of extending vehicle and traffic law requirements and regulations that currently apply to bus drivers to drivers of stretch limousines, the appropriateness of establishing a limit on the maximum allowable time frame age for stretch limousines to be permitted to operate on the roadways within New York State, to conduct a review of federal laws and rules as they relate to the regulation of stretch limousines, including but not limited to the identification of subject areas specifically regulated by federal laws and rules, and whether and to what extent federal laws and rules preempt the state from acting with respect to such regulation of stretch limousines. The need for additional safety measures for stretch limousines, including but not limited to increasing the minimum age for drivers to obtain a license to operate a stretch limousine, and the installation of safety features in such vehicles. And finally, the enhanced coordination between the Department of Motor Vehicles and the Department of Transportation in terms of the oversight of stretch limousines. I'll pause there.
Okay. I know that's a lot to take in. It's legislative language, but it is very clear in its articulation what our charge is here today. So with that, I just want to ask really quickly before we move forward, any questions at this point in time with regard to, the legislation that was just reviewed? Okay, Alan?
So Ron is now going to continue with a short overview of the legislation that's been passed in the last few years. As Kevin mentioned, a lot of work was done. He's got it organized into buckets for each different topic area and just a very high-level, quick overview.
So, thank you. On the 28th, you also have received a virtual binder of all the statutes that have been passed pertaining to the oversight and regulation of stretch limousines. And they fall primarily into 4 buckets: vehicle safety, passenger protections, driver requirements, and consumer information. And I'm not going to go through in any great detail any or all those bills, but I do want to highlight, the types of actions that the state has taken to enhance the safety of both the occupants as well as the vehicles. They include the requirement and use of seatbelts in all stretch limousines, the prohibition of using general GPS, and requiring that if there is a GPS device in this vehicle, that be an approved commercial GPS device. There are new penalties for a company that tampers with a federal motor carrier safety sticker, as well as an individual or company that tamper with a DOT out of service decal. We have put in place efforts to ensure that private inspection stations that conduct under DOT's jurisdiction inspections of passenger vehicles cannot inspect these stretch limousines. They have to refer to DOT for a more comprehensive inspection. We also, since the tragic incident, have been able to secure legislation that allows us to impound and or immobilize a vehicle that has either been subject to a safety defect or placed out of service by the department. The agencies have the ability to now seize the license plate and suspend the vehicle registrations. We have increased the penalties for owners, operators that operate a vehicle that is in violation of the department's safety requirements. We have increased the insurance, the state has increased the insurance requirement coverages for these types of vehicles, as well as prohibiting U-turns on public roadways. In terms of driver requirements, there are new driver license validations that the state has to ensure that the individual who is operating that vehicle is appropriately credentialed. That includes requiring now a new CDL license, as well as being subject to drug and alcohol testing. In terms of consumers, if the consumer identifies an issue that they think is unsafe, we have a hotline in place that they can report the issue that they are concerned about. Within each stretch vehicle, there must be conspicuously displayed the information on the driver qualifications, the state inspections and the result of those inspections, as well as a QR code and the phone number that they can immediately, file a safety complaint. And also, we require that any vehicle that falls into the category of a stretch limousine be immediately reported by an inspection station if it is presented for an inspection that it is not eligible for. Out there.
Okay, does anybody have any questions? Again, we're trying to keep it high level, but any questions about the legislation? Okay, so again, quite a bit has been done, and I'm sure there's more to do, and now we're going to hear from you about what your thoughts, concerns, recommendations may be of additional legislation that should be enacted to further enhance limousine safety. As each member shares your suggestions, we'll be compiling a list of topics for the task force to discuss at future meetings. Right now, we just want you to share your thoughts, and we won't have an in-depth conversation. So try to be clear and concise as to the proposed action or recommendations you're suggesting. It'll be helpful if you can keep your remarks to 5 or 10 minutes so we have time for discussion at the end. I'll let you know if your time is running real long and ask you to wrap it up so other folks will have time to share. And after everyone has presented, we'll have time for additional comments. If there are any, as you heard other people talk, maybe you had new thoughts, and so we'll have some time for that at the end. And again, I want to remind everyone that this task force was formed to identify areas to further enhance vehicle safety, passenger protections, driver requirements, and consumer information. So please focus your comments on identifying forward-looking suggestions to fulfill the legislative requirements. Okay, let's start again with Nancy DeMonte.
Thank you. I do have several concerns, but I'm going to keep them concise as you request. Our limousine on Long Island was, that crash occurred because the driver made a U-turn, so I'm very, very glad that that went through. And another drunk driver rammed into the car. So that was a recipe for a storm. And my concern is the application of law enforcement. We have seen a number of U-turns occurring in that very same spot since the laws were passed. Obviously, I am not a police officer, I'm not a sheriff, I'm not a state police, but maybe the communication between these laws and these agencies, that's a concern I have, because we're seeing the U-turns, we're seeing the drunk drivers. maybe that, obviously we have nothing to do with the BAC levels, but a person who's a drug and alcohol counselor for many years, I'd love to see it lowered. And obviously that's not the job of our task force, but there's a lot of unnecessary moves made on the roadways, and all of these laws they're beautiful on paper. They are. They're great. They're comprehensive. I was a very, very huge part of this, so I know they are. But my concern is getting them enforced. That is so, so, so vital to me. And if there's something we can do, penalties are higher. Yes, insurance absolutely needs to be increased, and we are dealing with this right now on our crash. But how do you enforce it? What do we do? I mean, the number of U-turns out there on that very spot is just horrendous. It's terrible. And the signage, of course, is not correct. We know that. Is it something we can do to maybe strengthen this area?
Okay, thank you, Nancy. Kevin Cushing, next.
I'll piggyback on Nancy as far as the enforcement issue. Obviously, we put together what we thought were regulations, laws that made total sense based on history of accidents that have occurred. We're not the experts by any stretch of the imagination in how these good laws, regulations can be enforced. And we have folks that are on this committee that would be able to give us some insight into that. And I'd be very much interested to know that, are these enforceable and how are they being enforced? That's the first thing. The other thing that I'm very interested in hearing is we've got two experts in the limousine industry. And I know in the work that I was involved in working with getting laws passed with Nancy, is we weren't working directly with the folks that are in the business. And I'd be very interested to know what the laws that have been passed over these past couple of years, what impacts have it had on that industry. Are they enforceable? Can they be improved on? Are there any things in here that they find overly burdensome? As long as it doesn't impact safety, I'd be interested in hearing that. So I'm really interested in hearing from the experts from the limousine industry, as well as the state police and the people that enforce these regulations.
Okay, thanks, Kevin. Next is our limousine representative, one of them, David Brown.
David, you're on mute.
Okay, I agree with both Kevin and Nancy. And Ed will agree with me on this too. New York State is one of the most regulated states out there. There are laws upon laws upon laws. We have to increase communication between DOT, between DOT and the state police, the DOT, the state police, and DMV. This bad guy that we had with the Schoharie accident, if the communication was increased, not the laws were out there to get this guy. If we increase communication, that would be key to everything. Enforcement, things have to be enforced. Communication has to be put through. We have the laws out there right now. As Ed will agree, we are very, very regulated. And that's a concern. Are we just adding more laws upon laws? Because that doesn't matter if they're not enforced. If there's no communication and DOT doesn't understand what DMV is doing and vice versa, or the state police don't have the teeth to go out there and enforce these laws. Just an interesting statistic, after the Schoharie accident, 59 plates were removed from SUVs, stretch limousines out there. This was done before any of the laws were put into place. So what I'm looking at is better communication. Are additional laws important? Yes, I feel that there's a lot of good meat in this. but we have to take a look at the big overall picture. And the overall picture points to communication. You know, the age of the stretch limousine, is that important? Yes. Is it life threatening? To a certain extent it is, but I think there's things for us to increase before, you know, we go after some of these other ideas. And that's a concern of mine. Ed and I are one of the good guys. We go through DOT inspections all the time. Our vehicles are torn apart with these DOT inspections. You know, our safety records are impeccable. We go out of our way to help the NTSB and New York State DOT and the state police when they have a question in the upstate area. So where I'm going with all of this is increased communication, and taking it from there. Ed, I don't know, you know, what you're going to say.
Sure.
Thanks,
May
David.
I?
Ed, you're up next. Yep.
Okay, terrific. So I agree with what Kevin and Nancy and David have said. One of my other roles is I serve as a commissioner on the Westchester County Taxi and Limousine Commission. So being in that position, we regulate our local TLC, our local industry. So I'm very attuned to the rules that we all have to follow for public safety. It's always the charge of government to provide the public with a safe environment and safe service. I think Nancy was saying about enforcement. I think the problem is we have great laws and rules on the books, but they're hard to enforce under, you know, like, for example, I was thinking, why aren't we GPS tracking vehicles that are taken out of service? What happened in Schoharie was an unscrupulous operator was red stickered, and he decided he didn't want to give that trip up that night, so he ran the vehicle that had failed. Nobody stopped him from running it. What happens if those vehicles that are red stickered have a GPS tracking device on it, like an ankle bracelet for cars or, you know, for vehicles? Very easy. The vehicle moves out of a geographic area. It triggers an alarm in a monitoring station, and then we know that vehicle's moving. Or we take the plates off that vehicle so it can't move. We educate the public. What should they look for when they're hiring a limousine service? I've had people come to me, and they'll come to me with, well, we don't have these super stretch limos in our fleet. We have buses. We have a limousine bus, and then we have coach buses and mini buses like David. But they'll come to me with some outrageous rate, and I'll say, you know, just know what you're looking for. What kind of insurance is on that vehicle? How is it registered? You can't have a 19-passenger vehicle registered as a limousine. It's a bus. It needs to have bus plates. It needs to have bus insurance, a minimum of $5 million, not $1.5 million commercial liability. So I think educating the public on what should you look for when you're hiring a limousine service. That's one of the, that's consumer information bucket. And I think that campaign can go out very easily. I tell people to look at the stickers on the registration stickers. If it says it only seats 9 people and this vehicle is much larger and can seat, you know, 18, 19 people, you know that operator is doing something they shouldn't do. They're trying to get their vehicle registered as a limo when in fact they're really running a bus, and therefore that vehicle isn't being inspected the way it should be. So consumer information and getting the consumers to know what it is they're buying and what it is they're getting into is really important. Enforcement, finding new tools in the toolbox besides just issuing summonses or taking off plates. I've been thinking a lot about, you know, using GPS technology to track vehicles that are taken out of service. So we have live information about where are these vehicles. Let me see, the issue of vintage or historic vehicles. So we know old vehicles can still function on the road safely, and they do add a certain element to somebody's celebration. So is a 10-year-old vehicle safe? Perhaps, perhaps not, but I don't know that it should necessarily be a cutoff. I think if we develop a rigorous inspection criteria, that a 1-year-old vehicle or a 15-year-old vehicle could still be on the road if it's inspected and passes. Many coach buses are on the road for well over 10, 15 years, and they go through DOT inspection several times a year, and they have to pass. If you don't pass, that's when the vehicle, I think, should come off the road. Let's see what else I have here. CDL licensing for limousine operators is a no-brainer. Drivers should be subject to CDL regulations, not just TLC regulations if your municipality has a TLC. We're randomly subjected to drug testing. Our fingerprints are in the DCJS, so we're constantly being monitored. We have to undergo other training throughout the year. I feel that CDL licensing is not a burden. I think it's a necessity. And I really like the idea of having a uniform training program that we could roll out to everybody in the industry. So again, the idea of making a U-turn, tragic in Long Island, but as Nancy says, it happens every day. It's only a matter of time before it happens again. The driver, well-intentioned, trying to get back to the winery, but made a really bad judgment. But there is no such thing as common sense. We need to give everybody there's nothing common about common sense. We need to give everybody the same roadmap of rules on how to operate. So you need to tell drivers, you can't make a U-turn because you're going to block the road and put yourself and your passengers in jeopardy. I just think having that training is essential, and I would really support that. And again, as an operator, I don't look at it as burdensome. I look at it as a benefit to my company. It's just one more way that we can operate a safe business, and really that should be marketed to your customers. Our drivers are CDL licensed, our vehicles are insured for $5 million. Our drivers undergo rigorous training every year. I think these are valuable tools that every consumer should be looking for and that every operator should subscribe to.
Okay, thanks, Ed. So we have some consistent comments coming out, and each person's kind of adding to that, and we're developing a good list of recommendations. Okay, Ron Barton.
Thank you. As I said, I had worked for the DOT for a little over 25 years. When I started in the 80s, it was pretty much instilled in us that our bus program, inspection program, bus program had been around for decades. As a matter of fact, the predecessor to the DOT was the Public Service Commission, started regulating and inspecting passenger carrying vehicles in 1907. That's the history that's also found on the DOT website. In 1971, the Public Service Commission turned the regulatory functions over, which was our bus program, to the Department of Transportation. What I have witnessed over probably the last handful of years that I worked was a degradation of our inspection programs. I don't want to get into who did it or what it was or anything else, but what I would like to see is I would like to see that Inspector General's investigation that not only I requested, but was requested by State Senator Jim Tedisco. They have not interviewed me. I've got some important documents that can...
If you could keep your comments focused on what the task force is charged with.
Exactly. What I'm trying...
Investigation is a different topic.
Please, what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to shorten this task force job as far as putting in new regulations and everything when everything was in place prior to this accident. A lot of people have been led to this. Nobody has owned up to what they didn't do before or after this accident, and it's gone almost 4 years, and now the FBI is listed as culpable. So I just want to bring our inspection programs back the way they were. Okay. They've been degraded. That's all I'll say about that. According to what I read, the task force can contact any agency or whatever for any information. And the fact of the matter is I want the task force to contact, if it has to go through the governor's office, the inspector general to find out where this investigation is. It does have a file number. We'll leave it at that. The only thing I want to say other than that is everybody has had some really good points. The age of a limousine is not important. It's the condition of the limousine and the maintenance that it went through when it was used. I think that's something that they don't have to worry about right now, because if it goes through our semi-annual bus inspection program, they check everything over, including the body, the frame, and all the components that are important to the structure of the vehicle. So I don't think that's really important. Of course, you're talking to somebody that was in the Marine Corps, and we didn't throw anything away. We rebuilt everything. So anyhow, I'll leave it at that.
Okay, thanks, Ron. Albro Fancher?
Yeah, I don't really have anything to add that hasn't already been said. So in the interest of time, I'll just let the rest speak.
Okay. Joan McDonald?
I just have a couple of points to add. I clearly support Ed's idea with the using of GPS to track vehicles. One of the questions I have for Ed and David is, have we ever taken a look at the entities that do the retrofitting of traditional manufactured limousines, who do the retrofitting to make them stretch limousines? Is that the sole responsibility of the owner and or operator? Is there anything that we should be doing there? I would look to the industry to provide some insights. And then the other thing that I would add is, I in addition to a CDL and a uniform training program, I think the training should, in addition to should have a component of in-service training. Because as folks have mentioned, the laws change, the technology changes on the vehicles, and we need to make sure that an individual who is licensed today and continues to maintain a license for 3 years, 5 years, whatever the time period would be for some in-service training, is up to date on what those laws are, the state laws, the federal laws, the local laws, and what the technology might be in their vehicles to make sure that they understand that as well. Those were a couple of my thoughts.
Okay, thanks, Joan. And Matthew Driscoll.
Thank you. And kind of following in the line of
jump in 1 second?
questioning, I have actually a question and a suggestion. My understanding is that most of these vehicles are, not all, but certainly are purchased as regular sedans or SUVs or what have you, and then they're altered by a body shop or a coach builder. So my question is, are there safety standards that regulates the extensions of those chassis, be it a sedan or an SUV or what have you, from the federal government? And then my suggestion would be that I think, the altering process, it should be standardized so that, those vehicles would be required to add, safety elements like intrusion bars, braking system, airbags, what have you, that are applicable to the weight and the size of that particular vehicle. I think that would be important information to have as you, make that a part of a record for each vehicle.
Sure.
So I don't know the answer to that question, but I thought I'd ask.
Ed, do you want to go over the QVM program or anything like that?
Well, just again, at a high level, the major auto manufacturers, Ford and GM, have programs, QVM, quality vehicle manufacturer, and OEM, original equipment manufacturer. I think OEM is GM's coach building arm. They do exactly what you're asking about, Matthew, is they have certain standards. You can't just stretch any vehicle. A vehicle, when Lincoln produces a chassis, it's all coded. Certain ones can be stretched, certain can't. Certain are designated for livery, and others can't. I shouldn't say can't. It can be stretched by anybody, but the manufacturer doesn't recommend it. So yes, all one thing to consider is, should all stretch limousines licensed in the state of New York be OEM or QVM? Because then you have the research and development of the major auto manufacturers standing behind the program. And then the coach builders are certified by Ford and GM. So there are local, so Ford and GM don't do the stretch, but they certify the builders to stretch their vehicles. So if you go to a company that's not OEM or QV, then you're right. You might not be getting a safe stretch.
Yeah, I think that was part of my question, is if you go to a body shop as an example, to your point, I think you probably can stretch anything. So how kind of regulated is that? And how safe is it? Because if you stretch something, are then the appropriate safety equipment, part of that, elongating of a vehicle?
Right. Beefed up braking system, suspension system, cooling for the end. Absolutely. And all of that is taken into account when vehicles are certified by the original manufacturer. So we look for coach builders that are OEM and QVM. I wouldn't buy a stretch from a coach builder that wasn't certified by the major auto manufacturer.
Just for clarification, the stretch that that was in the accident in Schoharie, that was a non-QVM vehicle. So that excursion was split in half, and brakes were put on it, exhaust, the whole 9 yards, but it wasn't QVM. That means they didn't put on heavier brakes, heavier exhaust system, things like that. And that's a concern. That is something that, again, slipped through the cracks. But DOT goes through our vehicles, whether they're QVM or non-QVM, and takes a look at the braking system. Not just takes a look at the braking system, but our vehicles, they go through brake tests. They have to stop within a certain amount of feet. So there's a lot of regulations and rules that are already encompassed on those stretch limousines right now. Ed and I go the extra yard, and we get the QVM and the other by Cadillac, that type of certification. But that's a good point. The vehicles out there where we're going to limousine vans right now. A limousine van, it is a cargo van that is stripped down, and it still can handle the weight that it's assigned by the manufacturer, but the inside is, for example, a limousine inside. So it still has the heavy-duty brakes, the heavy-duty exhaust system, but it's not cut in half. It's just the inside is modified. And that's what we're trying to get the point across, is that in our industry, there is some good limousine manufacturers and some terrible ones. The one that was used in Schoharie was absolutely horrific. And again, I keep saying this, that vehicle should have never been on the road. And again,
indeed,
getting back to enforcement on that.
It was red stickered. It wasn't on the road. It was on the road illegally. It was just yeah.
May I add something to the bill? May I?
Just 1 second. We're getting into a conversation, and again, they asked for expertise. We've got great expertise here. I do want to make sure everybody gets a chance to add new ideas before we get too deep into any one. So yeah, Ron, if you want to go ahead and comment, and then I think Kevin wants to comment as well. Then I want to hear from the folks on the dais that haven't gotten in yet. But Ron?
Oh, okay. Back in the day, DOT used to require bus manufacturers, school bus manufacturers to submit a blueprint to make sure that it met the department's measurement standards and, other standards that were set forth that were actually over and above the federal bus standards. What I would like to suggest is that anybody that stretches a limousine or whatever is going to draw a blueprint. That blueprint, if it wants to be sold in New York, go back to the way they used to do it with the school buses, have it submitted to the DOT, and the building is right full of engineers that can probably take those blueprints and check it for compliance with federal motor vehicle safety standards. That's probably the closest thing you're going to get to, a vehicle that should be on the road would be one that met the federal motor vehicle safety standards.
Okay, thanks, Ron. Kevin, did you want to add something?
Actually, I've been getting some messages that the person providing sign language needs a break and needs to be passed over to a secondary sign language person.
Okay, so why don't we take a quick minute here and
Yeah, and we need access to the pen because the other interpreter could not see me. That's why she's been interpreting for over an hour while I was waiting for her. So we need you to give us access to the pins, please.
so
Whoever is the host, we need you to give us access to pinning each other. I mean, co-host us, please.
all right, we're taking care of that right now. Sorry about that.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
To the sign language interpreters, why don't you tell us when you're ready, and we'll continue.
I'm ready to go now. I've been sitting here, so you guys can go. Ruth needs a break. She's been going for over an hour, so I'm ready. You guys can go.
Thank you.
Okay, so again, lots of great input and some beginning of some good dialogue. But I do want to let the folks on the dais share their thoughts, suggestions, recommendations, and questions. And then we'll go around one more time if anyone's had any other thoughts as you've heard other people speak.
Anything else?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Moderator. First of all, the moderator did say early on that there is a collection now building of information that you're giving us, and we are taking the notes here so that this task force can then begin to prioritize some of the things that have been said. For instance, when Nancy and Kevin started out with the theme of, enforcement problems, and then Dave and Ed, also suggested together, it seems to me that increased communication could be a solution. So that is something that we really need to talk about. I know that at DMV, we have a mechanism, it's called the P memo. And the P memo will go out to law enforcement. We may want to think about that. We may want to rethink about that. You may want to help influence us to how many times we would do that, during the course of the year, because of your good work, especially those who testified, 3 years ago with the Senate. There are a number of bills that are now laws. So maybe we need to communicate, with law enforcement and other entities in such a way that it would satisfy, this task force in terms of the communication. I think, Matt Driscoll, brought up a very good subject matter for us. The altering of a limousine process. And we heard from those who are experts in the field. That's another area for us to really delve into. And so far, what we've heard, there are things that we can look into further with your constant input. So thank you.
Anybody else?
I just want to thank all the members of the task force. I think you all have, not only put forward some very substantive suggestions, but I really think it's helping us to really look at how we would develop and can develop a structure for this task force to take on some of these issues that have been identified. And Alan, with your permission, I think what one of the things that I think we need to actually take on is, kind of a discussion about the cadence and how we want to structure our subsequent meetings here to make sure that we're addressing the issues that you've identified and that we allow ourselves time for discussion. And also keep in mind that we've got a charge for a public meeting, and we also need to come to the development of an actual written report. So
I said that we have one more chance.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Okay.
I'm not sure if anyone has anything more to say, but I know sometimes when I listen to people talk, I get new ideas. So
you want to make sure that we get it.
Yeah.
So we want to make sure that we open it up again and make sure that we actually have everybody's.
So especially the folks that went earlier, if anything's come to mind that you want to add additional comments or questions, we can just do. I'm not going to call on you, just call out if you want to speak, and then we'll go on to, as the Commissioner said, talking about our next meeting.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I wasn't trying to cut off conversation. I wanted to make sure that we were actually capturing additional ideas.
This is Kevin Cushing. I've got something I'd like to bring up, if I may.
Yeah, could you speak a little bit louder?
I can. One of those laws, one of those things we were looking to do when we put together that legislation was the customer service resources and the establishment of a safe limo website. When you think about how people actually engage with limousine services, let's face it, people get on the web, they do research, who's out there, who's available. And I think I've been on the site a few times, and I think there's a start there, but I think it really needs to be enhanced to a great degree than where it currently is, but it's there right now. At least there's a framework to it. And I think a better job can be made to help people weed out the good limousine companies, the vast majority of limousine companies, versus those bottom feeders. So I just want to put a little bit of some eyeballs on that as we go forward with this process.
Thank you. Thanks, Kevin. In fact, Mr. Moderator, I wanted to also say that what we heard from Nancy, Kevin, Dave, and Ed, they did bring up the subject matter that Kevin just really talked about, and that is the education of the consumer. And I think one of the things that we might be able to talk about is in terms of the social media. Everybody walks around, like this. Is there a way for us to communicate, to the different constituencies that might need, that type of travel mode, a limousine? And is there some sort of a campaign, a communication campaign, to alert constituencies on what to do, how to do it? And I think you hit it, Kevin, in terms of the Safe Limo website or something like that, so that it would be out there for those people. They would know if they needed information, here's the source, here's where we would go. So thank you for that. I think that's something we should really think about.
Can I add to that, please?
Sure.
I'm Nancy. I think that's a very, very good step. And to add to it, this might be a very tall order, but we've all lived through this pandemic for 2 years already. And I remember, I still see it. I'm very conscious of public service ads, whether it's get a booster or call your New York State Department of Health, whatever it is. Why not a couple of little throwouts on the television or something to that effect? Because there isn't a person who hasn't seen a COVID ad, if you want to call it an ad, or informational piece on some sort of media, not just a Facebook or an Instagram, but television, podcast, radio. It really needs to get out there because a lot of people have no clue. They see a limo, they see a bar, and they see strobe lights. They don't know what they're stepping into, and they need to. They need to.
Thank you. Thanks, Nancy.
Anybody
Hey,
else?
Mark, it's Matt Driscoll. Just to add to that quickly, maybe there's a way to develop some sort of a rating system. Many people do go online to look for, goods and services. Maybe there's a way to develop some sort of a rating system, that could kind of score, services.
Matt, don't forget, people can go online and see a company's, Ed's company, my company, what our DOT rating is. If we have a miserable rating, I mean, that should say something about the company itself. So there are tools out there to be used.
Yeah, no, I hear you, Dave. I think that's part of the education process. A person who may be looking for, that service for a weekend or what have you,
Right.
may not know they should look for a DOT rating. That's all I'm saying.
No.
And frankly, if there's a rating, to be attributed to somebody, it should be more than just that.
Yep. Thank you.
Some
Thanks, Matt.
Okay, any additional comments? There's clearly some commonalities among the task force members. I think there'll be some issues that we can
I think
agree
Ron
on.
Barton wanted to speak.
Yep, go ahead.
Oh, okay.
Ron?
When they had the Senate hearing, I had kind of half got through the idea that this letting the public know the operator's fitness is really quite an easy thing, and frankly, the federal government pays for most of that, and that's for interstate carriers. They go on the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration website, and I think Dave and Ed both know this. Your companies are on there because you have a US DOT number.
Right.
What I would suggest is that the software for Aspen allows for the entry into the software for state violations, which are the violations that are recorded on your MC300s. Okay, when the DOT comes in every 6 months. These inspections, putting them into the software could be uploaded to this federal website as a level 7, which is another jurisdictional inspection. And that way the public could go on there, not only find out what your vehicle inspection is, because from what I've seen on that website, all we're getting out of that is walk around inspections and driver only inspections for the most part. And frankly, that doesn't give you an idea of what the condition of the mechanical condition of the critical items are. Also, it also tells on there that the company has operating authority, and operating authority is the insurance, like Dave spoke of, the $500 million for an interstate carrier. Now, the intrastate wouldn't be on this for the operating authority, but I don't believe there's a lot of intrastate operator. I don't know. The DOT could probably tell you more on this, but you'd be able to have your tour bus companies, your limousine companies, and anybody that's required to have operating authority has a US DOT number would be on this one federal website. And believe me, it's not only gives the inspection, but it also gives the accident data. I mean, you could have a company that's their equipment is in excellent condition, but they've had a lot of crashes. And this website is just it's phenomenal. It really works really well for trucking companies and for your interstate bus companies. And I think that would be the best place to do this, where somebody could go to one place.
Thank you, Ron. Thank you very much.
This is Joan. I wanted to just add one more comment to what I had said earlier about the training. And my comments were focused primarily on the drivers. I want to make sure that we.
Hold on a second. There's
Hold on.
some noise in the background?
No, I think the sign language interpreters are switching.
Oh.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
hold on one second.
Let's just wait a second for them.
Okay.
All right, they're ready to go.
Okay.
Okay, thank
Okay.
you.
So my focus when I spoke originally was on driver training. But I think listening to what many folks have talked about on enforcement, and they mentioned in particular the U-turns, et cetera. I don't know if police training at the academies, whether there is a segment on limousine, V&T, traffic and safety, but that might be something that would be something to consider, that as part of their in-service training, they receive a refresher course in V&T law as it pertains to stretch limousines.
Thank you, Joan.
Thanks, Joan.
One more point, something we've done in Westchester through the Taxi and Limousine Commission, more pre-COVID, because there haven't been proms in the last couple of years, but we've had community education meetings around prom season where the community is invited to know what to look for when you're booking a limousine or a bus. So we've done that on a small scale in Westchester, and it might be something to roll out on a larger scale statewide. The other part of that is enforcement. There's a prom detail where Westchester County TLC partners with DOT, and they set up inspections, maybe in New Rochelle at Glen Island, if they know where the proms are being held. And a lot of limousines come from out of state, or maybe Long Island limousines come into Westchester. But every limousine that's dropping off, let's say at Glen Island for a particular prom, they'll be instructed to pull over because there's a large parking lot there, and they'll undergo an inspection by DOT. So our local TLC working with DOT has kind of had this two-prong approach with education before the prom and then enforcement on the night of the prom. It's kind of limited by the budget, so we can't hit every prom night and every venue, but we do a lot of them. And there's lots of confiscation of drugs and alcohol, and then on the other hand, there's confiscation of vehicles that fail DOT inspection or are not properly licensed and registered.
I think that's an excellent example, Ed, because that has, from my knowledge, it's been very collaborative.
Yeah. It hasn't happened the last 2 years because there haven't been proms, but I'm sure we'll be ramping up again this prom season at the Westchester TLC.
Thanks, Ed.
Yep.
Any other comments? So we've gotten a lot of good ideas. Again, we'll be pulling those together and coming back to our future meetings to take a look at those, and the Commissioner wants to have a little talk about next steps.
So I just wanted, I'll be more focused in my comments here. The bottom line is that this is the beginning of the conversation, right? So wanted to make sure that we had time today and use this time wisely for all the members of the task force, as you have done, to actually put your ideas, your suggestions, your concerns forward. And recognizing that this is not the only time that we're going to have a chance to actually do this. So I want to be clear about that. We have a charge, we have a mission, we're about executing it, but this is the beginning of the conversation. So I think the fact that everyone came to the table first and foremost with such robust ideas and giving us a path forward here is really what the next step is, because we do have opportunity not just to meet and to discuss, but to actually start to look to see how we can actually take some of these recommendations and manifest them forward. So I think the discussion today has been extraordinarily productive. As I said, I think it's the beginning. But at the end of the day, our charge is to really provide some subsequent recommendations to both the governor and the legislature. And so one of the things that I wanted to put on the table is recognizing that, we're going to need to meet again and kind of understanding that we need to structure some meetings here so that we can, one, so that it works for everybody, so that all the members of the task force can participate, but also to make sure that we can accommodate schedules, et cetera, and then recognize that we've got some timelines here that we need to work with. So first and foremost, I think, kind of, I'll put out there that I would suggest that we hold our next meeting sooner rather than later, but no later than mid-March. Does that work for everybody? First and foremost, we'll send out a doodle poll maybe if that works the best to try and get some dates that work and make sure that we can work off of that. Does that sound reasonable to folks?
I think that makes good sense.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah.
Okay.
You're welcome.
We'll make sure that we accommodate schedules as best we can. I think that from our perspective, I think what we'll do, we've got, we took vigorous notes here, not only the task force members themselves, but we've got some folks also helping us, and we've recorded this session. We'll make sure that we summarize the notes and we'll distribute them back out to everybody so that we've got a summary in advance of our next meeting to make sure that folks have materials to take a look at. And that way, if there's additional things that we want to put on the table, we can go from there. But really, it is about the time, it's about your commitment, it's about your ideas that are really going to help us inform our work here. And so above all, again, I greatly appreciate everyone's energies in this direction. Recognizing that, I think that probably what we'll do is, let's start with this doodle poll, get our next meeting scheduled, and then work to see how we can cadence out subsequent meetings, recognizing that we also need to allow time for a public hearing and take comments from the public. So how does that sound with everybody?
That sounds great.
Good?
It sounds good. Are any of these meetings going to be held in person, or do you assume all Zoom calls or WebEx?
I mean, honestly, we're for purposes of right now, we're just trying to, keep everybody safe with COVID.
Okay.
But my hope is that we can actually get together, God willing, and our health and safety guidance coming into fruition here over the course of the next few months. I'm hoping that as the weather gets better, our COVID numbers go down and we're able to meet in person.
Okay.
So for right now, we'll stay virtual, but we'll take it as it comes and adjust accordingly. But hopefully we'll make adjustments. But again, it would be actually very nice to have everybody in the same room.
Could I ask a question?
Yes.
Yeah, would there be some way to get maybe a mass email with everybody's email address that's on this task force, and a good a business or home seller phone number, so if I wanted to ask David a question or Kevin a question, or that I could get a hold of them?
We've got we have a liaison that's working with all of you to make sure that we share information. So if there's, I would urge, I don't want to put the state in the position of sharing information, but I think at the same time, we'll figure out how to best facilitate communication amongst the work group members, because obviously that's the goal of everybody, trying to make sure that we actually have, one, everybody can be in touch, and two, that we're facilitating conversation writ large to make sure that we can achieve our mission here. So we'll figure it out, Ron.
Okay.
All right.
All right, Mr. Krieger?
I think that's it. That's everything. A few closing remarks, or?
I don't think so. Anything, Commissioner Schroeder?
Yeah, the only thing that I wanted to add in terms of next steps, the more information that we receive, the better we all will be in terms of doing this task. I do know from watching the testimony, from 3 years ago, Nancy, I know that you had said that there was some things omitted, vital elements were omitted. And I think what you were talking about is during that period of time, maybe the first go around of laws. But I would be interested, and I know my fellow members here would be interested, if there are certain things that you believe were omitted that really should be looked at, this would be the time to do it. The other thing, Nancy, one of the moms, Mindy Grabino, a mom from Long Island, she said something about California did it right. I don't know what that means. I suspect that maybe, I know the 8 families of Long Island are close and talk. I don't know what that meant, but if it's relevant and we should know something about that, at the appropriate time, maybe you could share that information with us. But that's all I have, Commissioner. Thank you.
Okay.
Just, if I could, just briefly, I do believe she was referring to safety hatches, which is something I believe should be there, escape hatches. You can't get out. That was the problem with our crash too, getting them out. So I think that was one of our very big issues, other than, all the things that have been included, but that you cannot get out through a roof or pop open a window. And that's got to be investigated. I believe that's but I will be talking with them later anyway, so I will find out.
Okay.
Thanks, Nancy.
Thank you.
All right, I just want to make sure that we give everyone, any of the other task force members, anything else before we conclude today's meeting. All right. Again, I want to thank everybody. I want to thank our sign language interpreters. We're sorry. We'll make sure that next time around, we literally have a sign to make sure that we know that, that you guys need to get switched out. They're giving us the high sign. But again, thank you to the task force members. We really appreciate your dedication to this effort, and we'll be back in touch, and our work begins. Thank you all.
Thank you
so much.
Thank you.